1994, American Eagle Flight 4184 departed Indianapolis bound for Chicago's O'Hare Airport. The turboprop plane crashed in a soybean field outside the small town of Roselawn, Indiana. All 68 people aboard died. Author Terri Severin recounts the loss of her sister and nephew who were on that flight in her book, In the Wake of the Storm. Terri and other families affected by the crash worked together to bring change to the airline industry through advocacy and the passing of new legislation. Morning, Terri. Thanks for coming in.
Good morning. Thank you, Steve.
You were compelled to write this book and tell your story, painful as it is, because, well, it is a powerful story.
It is, and I actually started to keep the memories of my sister and nephew alive for her surviving son, who left on a different flight that night due to overbooking. And in the writing of that, another story needed to be told, and it's a story of hope and the resilience of the human spirit, of what dedicated individuals can do to change even an airline industry.
And it needed change. I want to read part of the foreword written by Jim Hall, who was a former chairman of the NTSB at the time of the crash. It was only through the strength and courage of those surviving family members working together we learned of the horror stories relating to their treatment. Constant busy signals for the airline's 800 accident information number, misidentified remains, personal effects being mishandled, unidentified remains not being treated with dignity. I'm going to skip a little bit here. And using confidential information obtained during this grieving process in court against the families. That's shocking.
And that's only a piece of it. I mean, shortly after the crash, 19 caskets of unidentified remains were buried of our families, and the airline at the time chose not to tell us about it. 4 months after the crash, I went out to the site for the first time to pay my respects to my sister and nephew. After the site had been cleaned up and released back to the owner of the land, and that day I walked away with armfuls of wreckage, personal effects, and human remains that were still scattered about. And I didn't know if that was my sister and nephew I carried out of the field with me.
But you felt compelled to gather not just the personal effects, but some of those human remains because of the dignity involved.
The dignity involved, and I met with the coroner the next day to turn those over to him for a proper burial, yes.
And you had also, just a few weeks after the crash, you had learned that a mass burial had taken place of some of the unidentified remains by American Airlines. No one ever told you about that.
Well, I didn't learn about that till 3 months after the fact. Some of the families started to get wind of it shortly after the burial, and initially the airlines denied it. And it wasn't till some of the families started making more noise about it where they finally informed all the rest of the families.
And there was another passage that I wanted to bring out. You were constantly making inquiries about the remains of Patty and Patrick, your sister, and her son, your nephew.
Yes.
You were told they would be arriving shortly, their personal effects.
Yes.
And the airline made some rather unusual requests for you to be able to identify their personal effects.
They did. They wanted us to not only give an itemized listing of everything they had on board with them, which I didn't know, I didn't pack their bags, and secondly, they wanted us...
They wanted you to tell them what was in the suitcases, what they had packed personally, right?
They wanted us to send pictures with my sister and nephew with those items along with receipts indicating that, yes, indeed, those were their items.
Which they really couldn't have honestly believed that you would have receipts of personal effects that belonged to your sister.
Right.
And
I know
her
I
son.
could have identified them if I saw them, but they told us that we might take something that wasn't ours at that point.
Right. Let me just say, this is not an indictment of American Airlines. This is the way all airlines were operating at the time. Right?
And I did want to make that clear, too. It's not about just our airlines. It was an industry-wide problem that we came to realize. Yes.
You have been instrumental in affecting some change, all because of your painful ordeal. What kind of changes did you get through?
Well, for instance...
In the manner in which airlines deal with individuals like yourselves, survivors.
For instance, the National Transportation Safety Board is now the main hub of information for families following tragedies, so they can get timely and accurate information. The airlines, because of the law that was passed, had to establish a training program within their industry so they could better learn how to meet the needs of families following a tragedy. So whether or not the average flyer out there realizes that there are resources in place to protect them.
Well, Terri Severin, you tell a powerful story. It's certainly one that resonates with me. I was working that night of the crash in 1994, and I remember going on the air and reporting it, initially breaking programming, and it's something that we will all never forget. Thank you for sharing that, Terri. And the book is In the Wake of the Storm. For more information, log on to our website, WGNTV.com/midday. We'll be right back.